Here at Certifiable, we're always coming up with game concepts and running around with ideas that we'd like to develop further. And we think to ourselves, man, we need to document this. But by the time we think about it, we're over halfway through the process and it's hard to kind of backtrack and retell something that's already taken place months ago. So for the first time, we've actually had the forethought to say, you know what? I have an idea, let's document it. So let me start by saying that this video you're about to watch now actually starts well over a year ago. We recorded everything, the entire process, all the ups and downs and mistakes of Alter Ego. Now, Alter Ego is not that complex of a game, so normally when working on something like this, it would not have taken us a whole year to do it. But during the process, we had 2 other games that we were developing and pushing out and doing campaigns for that did have harder deadlines. So this kind of always was that side project. That on top of the fact that I didn't really want Rick to know anything about this project, I wanted him to be able to come up to me and say, hey Jesse, what's the next project gonna be? When could we expect to get that out? And for the first time, I wanted to be able to say, it's done, it's ready. So this is that process. I think one of my problems is somehow by showing all the crap we went through, all these mistakes, it somehow shows flaws on the game making side. And the truth is it doesn't, you know. Yeah. That's just the process. And my process might involve more errors than other people, but that's my process. I had this idea for this plant game where you try to grow your plant really tall and until it fell over. But I was like, well, that'd be easy because people would knock their own stuff over and be like, I win. Yeah. So that evolved into what if Corey had to water and feed my plant, which means you're physically going to be the guy stacking stuff. And if it fell over on you, I'd win. That kind of started this concept, which we've been calling, thanks to Brent, Alter Ego. As an illustrator, drawing a character sometimes just isn't enough. I'll create a guy that I really like and I'm like, oh, this is a really neat character, but I now want to interact with him. And gaming seems like the next natural step to do that. It lets me grow and develop this character in his world within a game, and that's extremely fun. Now with Alter Ego, this is not the case. I actually had the idea for the game, started developing it, was well into what I thought it was gonna be. And I went through several skins before I finally found one that said, okay, now this feels right on top of this mechanic. We're all gods and we have a village in front of us and we're trying to supply them with food and, you know, prosperity. And I want my guys worshiping me so much that they build my altar so high that it literally falls on itself. I would love this to be, and again, I don't even know if you call it resource management, but I would love it to be that we're rolling, gaining these things. These things are allowing us to either strengthen our tower or, you know, build someone else's tower or altar or whatever. This particular case, I grabbed some stuffed dice, the original Redbird stuffed dice. So there's 2 charisma, so we're gonna call these labor. The green is going to be your farmers because it's plants. I was like, that's easy to remember. Red would be your worshipers. And finally, your cog would be a civilian. It could be turned into any other member. So I was like, easy to remember. And then famine, poison, whatever. Yep. You always have one more dice than player. Let's say it's your turn. You roll 3 dice. You get first pick. That pick is your turn. Like you can say, I'm going to get a worshiper. I put it over here. I'm done. Your turn. And I'm like, okay, well, there's famine and there's a laborer. The moment I get like 3 laborers, I now have to wipe out my laborers, build your spot. So I don't want the laborers. And I was telling Anthony, I played a quick, I say a round. I rolled the dice and he was like, oh, you're already at that stage? And it showed how dumb I was. On the very first roll, I rolled a laborer, which I didn't want, and famine, which I didn't want. So I'm like, that's dumb. Just came up with this ingenious idea of what will time the game. So there'll be a dice that gives you a scroll or a chapter. If the game gets 5, the game ends, or if I get 5, it ends. So if I'm ahead, I want to start collecting this to hurry up and end them. On this other dice, there's going to be a hammer that lets you build. Chapters, which ends the game, a drought, which will affect your farmers, civilians, which you can turn into anything, and then finally a nail lets you remove either yours or someone else's altar. The very first thing you do is you get your dice, then you perform one action. You could build, you could draw a card or play a card or something to that effect. So I would get my second worshiper. Now I can do my action. I'm going to remove and sacrifice my worshiper to get a card. So now I don't have an abundance of those. If you get too many of each guy, that's when you start getting the infidels, and they're going to go to you. I don't want that, because that means I got to build your tower. Because even sitting at it, looking at it, going, I can't test this if I can't stack it. So I went in the back and I was looking, like I said, I got dice, but I'm like, that's not really. There's got to be something that we could stack that we could at least just mess around with it and see. These little stackables are pizza shelves. Now these are what comes in when you get your pizza box, so the top doesn't smash the pizza. This is what I had originally pictured doing for like prototyping purposes, so we could mess around with it. Just got these today, and my favorite part of the story is when you came in, he was showing me, we got a couple of these, and he started kind of stacking them and said you can get them about 3 high and then they fall. And I was concerned because I'm thinking, okay, that's going to be too little. And but me and Britt had him in there stacked 15 high. After working on it for a while, usually in my case on notebook paper and a lot of it just mentally, you come to the playtesting stage. Now this is where you're sitting down to actually see what works and what doesn't. Now playtesting, especially the first few times you do it, it is not about what's wrong with the game, because most everything you have in front of you is going to mess up. It's about finding those little gems that make you say, okay, this part was fun, this works. How can we work around that to make that a stronger game?
Set the precedent, we're only playing with one farmer this game.
This game, yeah.
This game, there's only one farmer.
If the very first time comes out that we realize it's still a mistake, we go back to 2 on that turn.
Yeah, you can't kill that guy.
Wait, we can't kill that.
No, yeah, he's right.
Oh, it's gotta be, okay.
Oh shit! Yeah, you win.
What if it were a scroll when you played it that way?
You couldn't, because it's only the benefit.
Now he's saying, he's saying you couldn't take the benefit of yellow.
Yellow is not a villager.
Gotcha.
Grab your dice, then your action.
Oh,
Yeah.
Switch it up.
Here's one issue I have discovered: doing it this way, re-roll or flip a die, doesn't make sense when you take the die first.
Well, I would have done it to make you have to get a worker.
That makes sense.
We each got to build 2 on somebody else's.
Because you build as many as the farmers you don't have.
All right. Okay. So you can't build. The reason I'm asking is this: it goes in turn order. So you can't build. So that means you're the first that has to build on here, right?
Yeah, but I'm gonna build on yours.
You don't have to build.
You don't have to build on
toss.
Right.
You can build on anybody's.
And I keep on running back into the same issue. If you knock mine over, I win. If I knock mine over, I lose. So why am I even wanting to build it at all? I was like, no, I'll just play it safe and not build anything. But I'm like, what the brilliant part, if I knock mine over, I lose, period. But the person with the highest tower wins. So you'll always want yours one tower up above the other players. But that's what's going to start getting you in trouble. The other thing is if either of y'all knock over mine, I instantly win. So what I might want to do is I build mine up kind of high, so it's a little wonky. Then I try to start forcing y'all into building it. And everybody's kind of doing that. The more you playtest the game, you're going to keep on moving further and further towards what it is you're trying to accomplish in the mechanic. Now, when you test, you're going to find numerous things wrong with it. If you find 5 major things wrong with it, what you don't want to do is correct 5 major things at once. You want to correct 1 of those, maybe 2 of those, because sometimes once you correct 1 of those things, it straightens a lot of the other things that were wrong. By changing all of them at one time, you could actually cause more problems and then be working on the wrong thing. Made several changes. You can see we're already realized 4 farmers was way too much. 4 workers was way too much. So we eliminated that, and then I went to this right here. And you can see notes are already all over this. Some things you want to use before your turn, some things you want to use after. The livestock, when you turned it into a cow, it would let you flip or re-roll a dice. Mm-hmm. Now, you were saying it was usable, but the big thing we noticed was it was probably one of the least used things.
Yeah, it was only ever usable as like a gotcha kind of
take
thing.
that. So now the newest sheet we have, and I just printed these out. We have 2 things going on here. Number 1, there's 1 worshiper. There's now 1 livestock. As before, there were 2 and 2. Very first worker I get, I can now start building. Red means I will do it to end my turn. Green means I'll do it to start my turn. I got 1 action per turn. So Hunter can choose the dice, which he has to do, and then do an action. Or he can do an action, then choose the dice. Mm-hmm. That's it, that's a turn, and it moves pretty quick. Every game is gonna have issues. Alter Ego was definitely not an exception to this. For the most part though, I was feeling good about this as I was working on it. Things were kind of solving themselves. Everything but the farmer. I had this one guy that I felt like he was causing the other characters to have issues. But instead of working on all of them, I wanted to focus on this guy. He just ended up being a pain in the butt. There's some imperfections in the way the farmer works. And one of the comments was, well, why not just remove that character instead of trying to find a reason for him? But the biggest issue comes down to saying, if we don't have enough villagers, when we roll to see what villagers are approaching the village, they're all going to be the same 3 over and over to choose from. The only reason he was there is to stop famine from happening, but the issue is once we get a farmer, he just sits there for the rest of the game. If I could solve that problem, this game is so close mechanically. Everybody else can do something on demand, everybody, except for the farmer. So now the way it works, if I have a farmer and he's green, which means I can do it before my turn begins, I can skip grabbing a villager, use my farmer, and instead of choosing a villager from this pile, I can place him anywhere I want.
Oh, okay.
But if famine is rolled and you do not have a farmer, you remove any villagers and place it on the greatest altar.
Oh, wow.
So now if you're winning and I's like, yeah, you know what, I don't want any of these, I'm going to move him here. And the very next turn you roll famine. So now I've got to take any of these guys and I've got to put them on your altar.
Yeah.
If I can't do that, I get an infidel and therefore I got to build another one. So it should still all be sound. It wasn't. The way the farmer now works, for an action, you could sacrifice your farmer and get the ability of any red villager you do not have. The reason this becomes fun is it lets me build essentially for free, or if I have one guy on my army, it'll let me get a second guy on my army and then I can attack. So the big one's gonna be the sheep. Allows me to move a guy up without actually having the sheep. So this could be huge. We're gonna try that out. I think that's the problem solved. Now that we got things working, for the most part, really smooth, this is the fun part. For me, anyway. As an illustrator, it's a blast to start diving into saying, what can I make this look like? From everything from character design, to the rules, to the box cover, to the back of the box, there's a certain amount of joy that I have once we cross that threshold and I begin this process. This I painted with one of those textured paints and then I clear coated it, but they still definitely have a grit to them. Mm-hmm. And this is just, again, aesthetic for art testing purposes. One of the big rules around here is don't worry about making it pretty, just make it functional. But I did want to make these little. This I found because now there's grip on these. It's definitely not as slick as those. Mm-hmm. Out of game, I could stack these 19 high. Tried to get 20. It starts leaning every time, but now each player has 19 as if we're going to get that high. Mm-hmm. You can see this is where it started. All of these rough sketches turned into this. This is kind of Who Goes There-ish. It's somewhere between the look when I first started drawing the characters from Who Goes There, somewhere mixed between that and like Futurama or Simpsons.
I feel like without this video, people aren't going to believe it's you.
Well, bringing us to the next thing, I decided to go in a different direction, and I liked this cuter version. You know, way.
Yeah, no, that's you.
I went with bunnies because I thought it was funny to have bunny farmers and stuff, but the reason I didn't go that direction is because as cute as this would be with little bunny villagers, it doesn't tie into the title Alter Ego. That would almost be a different title. So I started saying, well, you know, this is still this cute, you know, look, but I do like these fun little meeple-esque, you know, that you can see the sheep and all that, and like this little guy who almost looks like a weeble wobble. There are a lot of changes from when you first start the gaming process to where you end up. With the boards, there are way too many characters, unnecessary characters. There were things that didn't even tie into the game, things I wanted to tie into the game but just didn't work. These things start getting whittled down the closer you get to the finish line. Biggest change is the soldiers, the army has become green. It was red, so this will allow us to remove our own guys and taking another dice, which will save an infidel.
Infidels is
Ladies and
misspelled.
gentlemen, this is Brent. His job here is to point out all of our mistakes. Brent, tell people here.
Remember when he said it's my job? That's right, and I get blamed for it, for doing my job.
No one likes Brent.
Infidels is misspelled.
What do you mean? You don't pronounce it infidels?
Actually, that is how you pronounce infidel in some countries. I learned, no, it's really not. But I would probably look that up at some point. In any game, besides working on the rule book, I'm also editing / proofing for grammatical quality, but also just for how the language flows, etc. There's cards, there's components, there's the back of the box, there's the Kickstarter page, and there's a lot of room there for inconsistencies. You need to make sure that the terminology is consistent across the board, which when something changes, that can be a challenge.
When we cut all these out, as is now, we're just going to stay in between these dots. Then we glue this onto a piece of chipboard, and then we're going to cut to the line.
So the prototyping's a tedious process, but we like to do it because it gives us a better idea of what the final product is going to be like. For example, when we're making prototype boards, we'll use close to the exact materials that we're going to be ordering from the factory. The main idea is just so we get close to the exact feeling of what it's going to be like, and when we're playtesting and other people are playtesting, it gives them a better experience. By doing it ourselves, it's just getting us there a little faster because we're not waiting for deliveries from ordering something, and also it's going to save us money in the long run.
We have our 4 character boards that we just glued attached to this, and hopefully they're compressed mainly to get the bubbles out and just to keep it tight and compact for when we're cutting it, it doesn't flake up. And then this will stay until tomorrow morning. Clearly, the worst part of any of the demo phases is this, because there's just no quick way to cut them out. And when they line up from blue marker edge to edge, it will give you that look. On to playtesting. This is the phase where you bring in people who aren't you to test the game you've created up to this point. Now, they're going to find things that you didn't even know were a problem. When creating a game and when playing your own game, or even having your friends who've also kind of been involved in the process do this, you're playing it the way you intended it to be played. Outsiders have no idea that you've been playing this way. They're just gonna do what they think they need to do, or they're gonna do what they need to win. This is where you're gonna find almost every mistake that you didn't know existed. Anthony and I cut these out. We attached the backs to them. This is more of an accurate shape to what the final will look like. This is, I think, version 12.
469.
Feels like it. So we're gonna break this puppy in, because that's what you do when you spend an hour cutting them. Now, one of the dice in Alter Ego was not designed the same way the rest of them were. This was the Divine dice, and on this dice was the Divine Hammer. Now, it served as a catch-up mechanism. The whole point of creating this hammer was to stop a player from getting too far behind and getting frustrated with the game. During playtesting, I found it did not work this way. Any player grabbing the Divine Hammer as it is can build free. So I don't want to spend an action building. I'm going to take this, build, then I get to use an action, or I could still use an action, take this and build. But either way, I'm getting a free build. For the first time as I'm playing with friends, there was this moment of frustration on their face where one of them was pretty much saying, well, I'm in a catch-22. I can't do any of my actions because I need to take this guy. And if I don't take this guy, I got to build on yours. And it was just this loop over and over. Again, the game is designed to be a quick pace thing, but it's not designed to be frustrating. So the solve, after talking for a while, the solve was the Divine Hammer. The new way, which is a lot of fun, is same as before. If anybody takes the hammer, they can build. But if no one takes the hammer, the player with the greatest altar has to remove his top level and put it on the lowest players. Now, what's going to make this fun is what happens every time we play. There gets to this point in the game where all of the players instantly slow down because now you're dealing with this 10 to 12 to 16 leveled altar that's starting to get shaky, and you don't want to build on your own anymore. If I take this hammer, I might knock my own over, and then I'll lose. But if I don't take the hammer, the weakest player is definitely not going to take it either, because now he knows that I've got to now take the top level and put it on his. So I think this actually will really help. So Rick just brought this in. This is, or it should be, the dice, the newest dice. We get a lot of our one-off stuff from board game makers. You can get a die or several dice or a board or whatever. So this is the 19 millimeter. Since the hero of this game really is the dice, there's not much more to it because there's really no character cards. This is also the squared corners as opposed to the rounded. Anthony and I were talking, we both like the rounded more. But with a game that's involving dexterity where you don't want to knock a tower over, I think the last thing you want is the dice to keep on rolling into something you do not want it to. This is set up much better where you have a chapter on one side. And if you use your cow, you can get a double villager. And then same thing here, you have your famine on one side, but if you sacrifice your cow there, you can flip it over and get your divine hammer. So it'll make sacrificing the cow a lot more useful where you could alter the game into your favor. One of the reasons that the die are yellow is for simplicity's sake. It's like a stoplight. You have green, yellow, red. So you could do one or two things. You could either command or you can influence, but you cannot do both. And it's letting you remember the order in which it is. So it's either green, then yellow, or it's yellow, then red. It didn't hit me until later. I really should not have made the divine dice red. And I don't want players to think, well, I wonder if this ties into any of the red villagers. So probably going to change this die to either white to be divine, or I'm thinking maybe blue, like the sky, like a godly color, but white or blue will most likely be the color of the divine die. Now, the toughest part of making a game is testing the rules. This is the hardest because you have to sit back, let people interpret what you've written about, and play it from that. You want so bad to intervene and say, no, you're doing it wrong. You're not supposed to say anything at this point. This is where you push the baby bird out the nest. Now, you have to know enough of the game. You have to have created it enough that you could write down everything to the finest little detail. You hand that over to people who've never heard of, never seen played, never played the game, and sit back and watch the slow train wreck.
It's a weird job working on a rule book because you're having to present ideas that were conceived by someone else in a clear, orderly fashion that no matter how good of a job you do on it, a large portion of people are going to be dissatisfied with. You can teach people how to play really quick in the first 5 pages. Here's the nuts and bolts of how to play this game, and here's the details later, and that's going to work great for some people. Whereas other people are going, no, I need to know what every component does. I need to know how you define an action. I need to know this. I need to know that. You cannot please everybody. So I've learned you don't try to please everybody. You just present the ideas and the concepts as well as you can for what you think is going to work well for the most people, and it's what's going to service the game the best.
Here's the thing, followers are fickle, and boy are they demanding, what with their constant demands to be fed and not drown and such. Welcome to the world of alter ego.
One of the mistakes I already caught, temples, they're all identical, and it doesn't say each player will get one, but they do.
Oh, here we go. You don't have to also remove your grunt to build 2 levels. So just the support gets rid. Okay.
Yeah, so that first word grunt should be support. Brent messed that up, Brent.
Because I was going off your nose.
I roll these 4 dice.
Yes.
I'm going to choose this one.
You get a worker
I get a
and
worker.
a army. Or
And
a,
one part, I get a soldier.
Right.
I could use my grunt to build 1 level on my altar. Okay.
So I'll take shepherd, and then I'm done. Because I have to use a
Green is
influence
before. Yeah.
to move. Okay.
I take the last remaining one. The worshiper.
Oh, I get why it's called alter ego now. Here we go.
Really?
Of course.
You're welcome, society. I came up with that little gem on the toilet. What the crap?
It's literally my one contribution. The one thing I can lay claim to.
This is what happens when you're reading the rules and somebody points something out to you. Nate.
Each game you play should include one
So what
yellow
if
die per player.
your
For
highest
example,
level
a 3-player game
has
would
a
be rolling
villager
3 yellow
on it,
dice.
and you have to put it on somebody else's.
Red dice.
I did not think of
A
that.
round of
Note to
one
self,
yellow die per player.
fix this problem.
I can't like choose to do that because if I pick hammer, then I build one on my own, which I don't want to do because I'm so afraid of it. I heard it sort of shake.
I did too. And it's not looking awesome. Right. Who am I?
You have to stack a thing. You have to stack 2 things. on top of mine.
And this is the game.
Stop.
Ryan, go ahead and celebrate.
Stop.
These pieces, like some of them are just like bent.
They're not well made.
She was a mind.
It is very leaning.
You're about to drop the back leg off the entire thing.
I can't put my elbows down anymore.
So was the workers.
Yes.
That was the least climactic fall ever.
That's fun though. It's a really fun game.
It's good.
You like it?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I'd play it again.
Anxiety that comes with
It's
this.
very anxiety.
It is also, yeah, you said it was like agility and also strategy and resource, but it's a lot of agility.
Now that everything's working, I can start tweaking and adding those little nuances, the little things that make the game stronger. This is where Anthony can come in and say, okay, now that I know how this is gonna work, here's how these things need to be developed, here's how the 3D world's gonna look. This is where the components get really strong.
When the actual game comes out, will it be like these pieces or will they be more uniform?
The idea was to have the legs with some kind of design on the side, maybe shaped like this.
The way any component that we design looks is always important, but something that goes hand in hand is function. We have to always think about how is it going to fit in the box? Are we just dumping all these into the box? Or are we stacking them and compressing them, but we're saving a lot more room? Other things that you have to keep in consideration are molds. When they make the molds for these 3D components, you have to keep in mind when you're designing the components stuff about having an undercut, or you create the model in a way that it can't pull out of the mold. There's no formula for any of this. You have to kind of just take it on a piece-by-piece basis. So for example, with the altar that we're doing with Alter Ego, we want it to be one piece, which means it all needs to come from one mold so that it can easily demold to be efficient in mass production. Now, if we do decide to add some kind of designs on top of the altar and something that might be a little more complicated to mold, then our process might change. So that'll be something that we discuss with the factory. They'll make their recommendations. They still inform us a lot of, oh, you can do this, you can't do that. And then we just learn along the way. So for next time or other projects, we'll know what we can or can't do.
And something hit me. You know, on Alter Ego, all the boards are the same. What could we possibly do to make each different, but not so different that everybody gets the same guy every time? And I got 3 of them. I just can't think of the 4th one yet, but one of them would be, what if I get one soldier? I can't attack, but if someone else attacks me, I could use that single soldier to defend by removing him. Another idea was you can't get 2 infidels at once. This group allows me to only take the one infidel. And the third thing, right now, if no one draws the hammer, this particular group would have favor to the gods. Instead of pulling one from the top of mine and putting on yours, I just get one from the resource pile. So you still gain it, but I don't get a penalty. On to Kickstarter. This is where you make a game from good to great. This is where it goes from being made to never being made. This is where we make $1 million. We've never made $1 million, but this is where you want to start thinking about, where do I want my game to end? Right now it's cardboard, but I can get dual layered cardboard. Right now it's cardboard, this to wood to plastic. You got to think about what's in your tiers. What are you stretching to? In our case, we're introducing a first player coin. That's an alter ego thing. We're also introducing a puzzle, which is a lot of fun. This is how people are going to see your game for the first time. This is how you introduce it to the world.
I came into the process pretty late in the game. Alter Ego had been in development a good while before I got here. As the graphic designer, I have a pretty big contribution to its development. I guess the largest I would say would be designing the Kickstarter page. It's not my first rodeo, it's more like my second rodeo. I have a little bit of experience with designing the House of Wrath page. It was a lot of back and forth with Jesse, Anthony, and Brent for copywriting and getting everything laid out. So I think I have a better idea of what exactly it is I'm going for the alter ego page with that little experience that I have. I think it was Anthony who had the idea of, why don't we just make the page and alter itself? So I kind of rolled with that, and I would start out by looking at our previous Kickstarter pages to see how things are laid out before we work with the actual visual elements of the page. I had this idea of looking at Egyptian architecture, Aztec architecture, and having these grand pillars that would frame information. So I would give my sketches to Jesse. Jesse would illustrate those in his style. So it's a lot of work getting the page perfect, but for this, I feel like I've kind of been making it my own and making it have like a certain visual identity, which has been fun. I've enjoyed working on it from start to finish.
So when it comes to Kickstarter, the community board, the Cove as we call it, is integral to our campaigns. It's where people come to get answers, where people come to write poetry, tell jokes, have fun. I've never seen a comments section as robust as ours is, because it is a never-ending flow of jokes, but also information. In the Cove, we've all got a part to play here at Certifiable. You know, we've all got characters that we do. Jesse is the bit of the curmudgeon, a bit of a prick. Hearn, he has more of a jovial sense. You have Rick, who is more of the apologetic personality. You have Coffee, who comes in and gives you the facts and the figures and the dynamics. And then myself, I play everything straight. You know, I'm supposed to be the voice of the community back to the people here at Certifiable. And I also give the information from here to everyone out there. So I don't necessarily get to play a character as such. Unfortunately, during these Kickstarter times, I am required to be on there 24/7. They've often said that I'm part man, part internet, because we respond so quickly. But if I'm not able to respond, especially if I'm trying to sleep, our rainbow backers take over. People who you can find in our Discord channel are tried and true. People who've been here from the very first Kickstarter campaign will chime in because they have all the information as well. I'm thankful to our Cove. As much grief as I give them, they are really the pulse of what we do here.
So that's a little look inside everything it takes to make a game. So the idea is that once this game is funded, then we'll do the second part of the video. Everything that happens from now till when it's actually in your hands. So we have to think about developing these components, the size of the components, color corrections, all those things have to be made, have to be figured out in order for us to get that package in your hands. So fingers crossed, and hopefully we'll have that video coming to you also.